It's were ultra cool, weren't they? But if you had Charlie Browns, I don't know why, because the Charlie Browns had the seam down the middle, didn't they, Chris?
Yeah, yep, they did. And me broadcasting extraordinaire, and one of our most talented Māori broadcasters, Bailey Mackey, and him, maybe even the chairman of the Rugby Union shortly, he's been lauding Crocs for ages, and his mates his cousins have all been giving him a hard time, saying he's an idiot and what a hoha, but, he'll just be revelling in this, so I hope he's not listening.
My theory is that cool people make uncool things look cool. The rest of us should just keep our sticky beaks out.
Yeah, so leave him to Bailey.
Leave him to Bailey. Wonderful. Thank you so much to both of you. Nadine Higgins, Chris Wikaira. Appreciate it.
Yeah, hei kona.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E Heidi Akine, the ruler gets run over the vaccine rollout and finds some shortcomings, including whether New Zealand can hit its targets on time or if we've even got enough doses. The Director General of Health joins us. A malicious ransomware attack brings one of the country's biggest DHBs to its knees. Have you been ripped off at the supermarket checkout? Plus,
we have touchdown in Rarotonga. We'll have all the updates for you on a momentous day as the Cook Islands bubble finally opens.
And we're in the mighty Manawatu, visiting two towns feeling abandoned. And don't forget, you can catch us live on Facebook, Freeview Channel 50 and Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5. Good afternoon, I'm Marama Tipole. A cyber attack has thrown Waikato's 5 public hospitals into turmoil. All internal IT systems, including computers and phones, have been closed down. The attack appears to involve a type of ransomware called Conti that was used to target Ireland's health department last week. Andrew McRae reports.
The nurses' organisation describes the situation as an absolute nightmare and says staff are struggling to do their jobs. The Senior Doctors Union says it's been mayhem. RNZ's been told some operations have still been done today, but only those where notes had been printed out earlier. The DHB says disruption to outpatient clinics has been kept to a minimum and hospital patients are still receiving quality care. However, people in Waikato are being told to stay away from emergency departments unless absolutely necessary. The DHB says the situation may continue for a couple of days at least. Ko Andrew McRae tēnei.
Deborah Powell of the Resident Doctors Association says everything IT related is down.
People need to understand that's not just desktops that people have. It includes our on-call pages. It includes how we do discharge summaries, how we order laboratory tests and radiology imaging. It's the whole kit and caboodle.
The DHB says some elective surgery has had to be postponed. Major doubts about whether everyone will be vaccinated for COVID by the end of the year have been raised by the Auditor General. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn reports on John Ryan's review of the government's rollout plan.
Mr Ryan says the lack of vaccinators poses a significant risk to getting the rollout done on time, and he's worried about vaccine supply, saying if not enough comes into the country, the current contingency plan is inadequate. The Auditor General also says some parts of the plan are not complete, including IT systems. The COVID-19 Minister, Chris Hipkins, says more work has been done since the review, and he's optimistic the country will be vaccinated by the end of the year. Rowan Quinn tēnei.
The government plans to urgently amend legislation to ensure the rollout is lawful. The Pfizer vaccine was approved under the Medicines Act, but the High Court has ruled that the law, as written, should only be used to cover a limited number of patients. The COVID-19 Response Minister, Chris Hipkins, says the ruling has highlighted a technical anomaly but raises no safety issues.
The rollout will continue, and Parliament, certainly the government, intends to bring before Parliament very quickly some legislation to tidy up what is largely a technical issue with the Medicines Act rather than a substantive issue.
The staffer at New Zealand's High Commission in New Delhi who has died of COVID-19 had worked there since Sir Edmund Hillary was High Commissioner in 1986. The man, an Indian citizen, died in hospital 3 days ago. The Foreign Minister, Nanaya Mahuta, says staff did all they could to care for him.
As you can imagine, we've given the embassy time to process what's happened. Everyone was living on compound like a family.
6 other people in the High Commission compound tested positive, but none are symptomatic and 3 have since tested negative. The first plane load of tourists from New Zealand to the Cook Islands since the start of the pandemic touched down in Rarotonga this afternoon. The Cook Islands Prime Minister, Mark Brown, was there to welcome it.
With the systems we have in place, the health preparedness that we've put in, working very, very closely with the Government of New Zealand, who have really demonstrated to the rest of the world how it's done. We're confident now with the opening up of our borders and the first flight of visitors coming in, and I think it's tremendous.
A deal has been struck giving iwi a greater stake in a controversial Wellington development. The organisation behind the Shelley Bay project, the Wellington Company, has reached a partnership agreement with Taranaki Whānui. Existing waterfront and other heritage buildings will be redeveloped as commercial assets, and Taranaki Whānui will retain ownership of them through a joint venture. A wharenui will also be built and iwi members will be eligible for a home ownership program. It's 5:04. To sport, not until late next week will the Black Caps finally get to train together for their test series against England. Coach Gary Stead says the first hurdle to having the full squad and staff together is a 3-day isolation period in their hotel rooms in Southampton.
We're hoping that everyone tests negative after that and we can train in small groups of 5 or 6 people. With the guys that have arrived from the Maldives, I think that they're in the same boat, 3 days of hard quarantine, and then they are still in their own little bubble for 7 more days after that. So, yeah, it's the best part of 10 days before we actually can come together as a full group.
19 of the 20-strong squad have now arrived in Southampton. Trent Boult, still at home, is set to miss the first test. The chair of the Rugby Players Association, former All Black captain David Kirk, says leading players will walk away from New Zealand rugby if the Silver Lake deal goes ahead. The national body is offering to meet with the association later this week so the latter can outline its Forsyth Bar proposal for a public share float. Kirk says there's a strong depth of opposition to the controversial deal among All Blacks. The Wellington Phoenix midfielder Clayton Lewis has re-signed with the A-League Football Club for 2 more years. That's the news.
Our jobs?
I'm always careful about this notion that New Zealanders just don't want to do the job.
Our homes?
We just want our life back. We just want our home. We bought this home for a reason, to live it. We didn't buy this home for it to fall down in front of our eyes.
And our health?
There are people who are languishing in terrible stress, waiting to get scans, for example, people who have suspected cancers.
Your radio morning report, weekdays from 6, on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday, Northland to Manawatu, including Coromandel Peninsula and the central high country. Showers easing tomorrow. Bay of Plenty fine, but the chance of a shower in the west tomorrow morning. Gisborne to Wairarapa, isolated showers today, mainly about the ranges, otherwise fine. Severe westerly gales for some exposed places today. Orowhenua to Wellington, fine. Bulla and Westland, showers clearing for southern Westland tomorrow afternoon. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Southern Lakes, Central and North Otago, mainly fine. Isolated showers in Central Otago and Southern Lakes, clearing tomorrow morning. Westerly gales about northern Nelson and Marlborough Sounds. Dunedin, Clutha, Southland and Fiordland expect showers with snow down to 200 metres tomorrow morning, clearing for the eastern areas tomorrow. Southwest gales about coastal Southland and Otago today. And for the Chatham Islands, periods of rain, possibly thundery, easing tomorrow afternoon. RNZ National at 5:07.
Thanks, Marama. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Elective surgeries have been postponed and the Waikato DHB thrown into chaos due to a cyber attack that's believed to have come from outside New Zealand. The attack has crashed phones and computers throughout the region's public health system, and the Senior Doctors Union says members working at Waikato hospitals and clinics are describing the situation as mayhem. People are being told to to stay away from hospital emergency departments unless it's absolutely necessary. The DHB's confirmed it has received a message that suggests it's a ransomware attack, but it had no warning the attack was coming. Waikato DHB CEO Kevin Snee describes what's happened.
It's a virus that's affected our system, and it looks like that's been malicious intent. So we're, as I say, trying to recover from that as we speak.
Is it a ransom cyber attack?
It could well be, and certainly the indications are that it is.
So what indications do you have that it is?
Well, we have we've received a message that we need to check the veracity of the message, but it appears to be indicating that it is a ransomware event. And obviously, when these events happen, as they happen in other parts of the world, people are trying to extract money from an organisation. Clearly, we will not be paying any ransom for this, but that's that's what people are trying to do when they put viruses like this into the system.
So, Kevin, have they asked for a specific amount of money?
No, they haven't.
And when did you receive this communication?
That was earlier today.
Have you had any warnings that this was coming, or any earlier threats?
No, we've had no threats. I mean, obviously, it's a problem that we're aware of internationally. We've had problems in New Zealand before, but we've had no threats in relation to Waikato DHB.
Is all your equipment working?
So we had some problems this morning with telemetry. However, that's been dealt with. The risk has been mitigated there. And we do have problems, for example, with our ability to read X-rays and lab tests. So with clinicians having to go down into the radiology department, for example, to read X-rays because we can't send them out on the computer system. So that obviously disrupts things.
So they've infiltrated further than just your patient records and bookings?
Well, it's the whole computer system we have a problem with at the moment.
So what does that say about your security?
Well, it's if there have been any security issues, and that will be determined by investigation subsequently.
Well, there is a security. Kevin, with the greatest respect, there is a security issue, isn't there? You've been hacked.
Well, clearly there is a security issue if we've been hacked. I guess the question is, how could we have prevented that? And that's any investigation subsequently will tell us that.
So what is happening right now in terms of fixing this?
Well, we are working with cybersecurity experts via the Ministry of Health, and working closely with them to get to the bottom of the problem and then to rebuild our computer system.
So you say you had no forewarning and no earlier threats, but what about the security of your system? Have you been told, or has a weakness or any faults in your system been identified that you were told to patch ahead of this?
We're obviously always trying to improve our system, and we've made a number of improvements to our system over the last year. So we haven't been told directly that we have a problem, but we've obviously been improving our system over time.
What are you telling patients? Because how long is it going to be before this is rectified?
Well, we'd hope to have this rectified before the weekend, but exactly how long it's going to take at this stage, we can't be certain.
Before the weekend, Kevin, it's only Tuesday.
I know, but clearly we can't be certain how long this is going to take at this stage until we've got to the bottom of it.
So obviously that places you in an incredibly serious position. What is going to happen between now and the weekend with all your patients, elective surgeries, emergency situations? What happens?
So we're working with both our regional and our national partners to make sure that any patients who need urgent surgery either get it locally with us or in our regional partners or with our national tertiary partners. So anybody who needs urgent surgery should get that.
So you're talking about diverting patients to different areas?
Some of them will be done, many of the patients will be done in Waikato itself, but it may be necessary for some other patients to be diverted to other hospitals.
And Kevin, just to be clear, with elective surgery, between now and when you get this fixed, no elective surgery?
No, elective surgery for cancer patients will go ahead, but if you don't have cancer, then you may not receive elective surgery. We will contact patients directly to let them know whether they're going to have their surgery or not.
And will the cancer patients still be dealt with in the Waikato DHB, or will you be sending them elsewhere?
We would hope to deal with them all locally, but if we can't, we will organise it with our regional and national partners.
What kind of risks does this present for you? I mean, are you sure you're across how far they have infiltrated your equipment and your systems?
That's been investigated at the moment.
And when will you know the answer?
I would hope to have it as soon as possible, but I don't have it now.
When you say that's being investigated, have you got GCSB helping you out? Government departments?
So we've got government departments working with us to sort this out. And we're working through the Ministry of Health, but they're obviously working with other government departments.
The ransom notice that you have received, you say it doesn't state a specific amount of money. Mm-hmm. What does it say about what they want then?
I'd rather not go into that at this stage.
Although they don't put a specific monetary value on it, are they saying that they want you to pay?
I'd rather not go into any detail at this stage.
What further threats have they made to you if you do not pay?
I'd rather not go into it at this stage.
Are there further threats if you don't pay?
I'd rather not go into it at this stage. It's a police matter, so I'd rather not go into this.
It's also a matter of huge public interest, Kevin. There are people who are waiting to have medical treatment who are now on the back burner as a result of this, and they want to know whether you've got it under control or not. So, are you being threatened with further disruption if you do not comply?
We believe we've got it under control, and we believe we'll have the services back up and running within a matter of days.
That doesn't answer the question, though, Kevin. The question is, are you being threatened with further disruption if you don't comply with the requests made?
So we believe we have it under control, and we don't believe that any further problems will occur as a result of this. We need to...
Why don't you answer the question, Kevin? What's your concern about answering this question?
I am answering the question, Lisa.
Have further threats been made to you if you do not comply?
We're focused on patient care and getting the systems back up and running, and that's what we intend to do.
It goes to the core of what happens next. So, are there further threats being made to you?
So, as I said to you, Lisa, we believe we have it under complete control here, and we will get the system back up and running as soon as possible, and the investigations will be had.
Kevin, you don't have it under complete control. You don't have it. You're cancelling elective surgery. You're asking non-emergency cases to go elsewhere. You're sending patients to other facilities. And You're telling us that you don't expect to have your system back up and running before the weekend. So you don't have it under control, do you? Are there further threats?
In the circumstances, we do have it under control. And irrespective of any further threats that may or may not happen, we will have the system back up and running.
And that is Waikato DHB CEO Kevin Snee. Homai o whakaro. Would love to hear your feedback on this. Have you had surgery pushed back? Have you been caught up inadvertently in this cyber attack? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. If you're working in the hospitals within the Waikato DHB system, we'd love to hear from you as well. How is it all going? It is almost 17 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National, and still to come on the program, we're in Rarotonga as the Cook Islands travel bubble finally opens. A report into the COVID vaccine rollout raises serious concerns about whether the government can reach its targets and if there's even enough vaccine in the country. And it calls on health authorities to be more honest and more transparent about the challenges and uncertainty ahead. The weighty report by the Auditor General drills down into preparations for the nationwide COVID-19 vaccine rollout. While it praises the health sector for its hard work and the government for contracting enough doses to vaccinate all of New Zealand and a number of Pacific countries, it highlights major shortcomings and substantial risks, including whether there are enough vaccinators, enough vaccine. There's no contingency plan if we run short. The delivery date and the COVID rollout is, there's a risk that we won't meet the target. The plan to extend the rollout to the general public is not fully developed. And it also says the ministry needs to improve transparency with the public, especially around uncertainty and the challenges ahead. And the Auditor-General is not confident the rollout will pick up pace in time to meet the December target for vaccinations. I asked Dr. Ashley Bloomfield if he'd like to revise that target in light of the report.
What I can say is I'm confident that we are currently on track to do that. We are ahead of our scheduled delivery at the moment. Well over 400,000 vaccinations have been given. We're on track for delivering over 1 million doses before the end of June. And we've got a big scale up then from July to ensure that all New Zealanders who are eligible are able to be vaccinated before the end of the year. And that's what we are busy planning to be able to deliver.
When this audit took place, the Auditor-General was aware of the scale-up that you're planning, but still says in the report, in our view, groups 3 and 4, there's a risk that those people will not be fully vaccinated by the end of the year. Is the AG wrong?
Oh, no, he's pointing out a risk that we're very aware of as a program, and we certainly had some good discussions with the Auditor-General's people around this. It's a huge and ambitious program. There's no doubt about that. It requires nearly 8 million doses of vaccine to be given before the end of the year if we're to reach every eligible New Zealander, which is our aim.
So over-ambitious, Dr. Bloomfield, with the targets you've got and the resources available, have you been a bit over-ambitious with the target?
Oh, not over-ambitious. We're scaling up with the resources, both the information systems that are needed, but also the workforce, and we've seen that workforce grow even in the last 2 or 3 weeks since the OAG did their work, and we're well over 4,500 people now trained to vaccinate. Our aim is to have 6,000 before the end of June, and that's the number we think we'll need to be able to deliver through July, through the rest of the year for that wider group.
So how many vaccinators do you need in total in order to deliver the rollout on time?
Well, our modelling suggests at peak we're going to need about 1,500 vaccinators on any one day, and so what we're
You're well short of that at the moment, aren't you?
Well, we've got 4,500 people trained, and we're planning to have 6,000. So so that by the time we get to that point, we'll have at least 4 people trained for every vaccinator that we might need at the peak.
So at the moment, obviously there was a media release today saying that you've got 5,000 trained, but on your vaccine dashboard it shows that you're only using close to 2,000 vaccinators. Why aren't you using all of them? Are some of them part-time and have other jobs and simply can't be on deck, or is it that you do not have the vaccine for them to deliver doses right now?
Yeah, at the moment we are delivering the vaccine at the level for which we have the supply, and we know the supply is constrained through to the end of June, and that's why we've got the sequencing framework. But from July, when we scale up, we now have this larger pool, as you've said, over 5,000 vaccinators available. Some of them will be part-time, some will be being sort of seconded from other roles, but we will have 4 times as many vaccinators trained as we think we will require at the peak of the delivery.
The Auditor-General's report says there's not a full delivery program to upscale this national vaccine rollout. So when you announced the rollout in your timeline, did you do that without a finalised plan on how you were actually going to deliver on the promise?
Well, the rollout of the vaccine has always been a phased approach. So when we started back in February, we had planned for that first group, which is our border workforce and their whānau. We then rolled out the next phase was, of course, into that group 2 and our frontline people. Now starting...
So you're just planning as you go, Dr. Bloomfield? Because the criticism from the Auditor-General's office is that there's not an overarching plan for delivery. So have you just been piecemeal doing bits of the plan as you go along?
Well, there is an overall plan for how we will vaccinate New Zealanders between now and the end of the year. And we know we have to scale up. But in each phase, as we get to it, there is detailed planning around the information systems, the workforce, the logistics of getting the vaccine out, which sites we will use, how we will involve general practice and pharmacy. So that planning, the detailed planning, is happening, yes, as we plan for the next phase. At the moment, we're doing all that detailed planning for the next stage of the scale-up, which is from July.
There remains, according to this report, a significant risk around having enough vaccines. So what's your plan if that should happen?
Yeah, this is a risk, and there are 2 issues.
How big a risk?
Well, at the moment, we don't think it's a big risk because Pfizer has been very good and delivered exactly as they said they would, so we're confident about vaccine supply between now and the end of the year. But so saying, we still have other vaccines that are going through the approval process, including the Janssen vaccine, the Novavax vaccine and AstraZeneca. So we have alternative vaccines should we need them.
So why do you think this report has identified supply as a significant risk, whereas you have not?
Well, actually, we have identified it as a risk. And what
a significant risk, Dr. Bloomfield, because that's the wording.
Yeah, well, what the Auditor-General said was that there is uncertainty about supply because of the global situation, both around manufacture and supply chains. And they were encouraging us, and you'll have seen us doing this over the last few weeks, to put that on the table with the public and say, look, actually, we're planning to have this vaccine, but there are some things that may be outside our control. So far, we're confident, but we need to be ready that there could be a disruption to the supply chain. So we're planning for that.
We seem to be, lacking in some of the basic necessities to deliver this, which is a booking system. So we're talking IT here. A booking system, inventory and distribution system, a vaccination register and an adverse events register that all talk to each other on the computer, right? And the Auditor-General says we don't have that. And in some cases, the booking system is paper-based or an Excel spreadsheet. So what help do you need here? Why don't we have this?
So 3 of those 4 things we've already got in place. We've got a COVID immunisation register. It's been in place since the start of the program and going very well. We now have the logistics system in place. Again, that's been developed as the program has developed. We have an adverse events monitoring system. And the one thing that is just coming online, and we're trialling it at the moment, is a national booking system. So far, DHBs have been using their own local systems. Some of those are quite simple. They are spreadsheets or Excel spreadsheets, but others are bespoke or dedicated booking systems.
So why has that taken so long? Because again, the report points out that even before you had a vaccine, you could have been working on this stuff ahead of time. You didn't need the vaccine to get it sorted, is what this report says. So why didn't we have our ducks in a row?
Well, actually, we have been working on this, and the first version of the COVID immunisation register was actually ready to go in December last year if we had needed it. It continues.
But it's about all the systems together, though, isn't it, Dr. Bloomfield? To achieve what we need to, all the systems need to interact with each other, and we can't just have one of these things. We need all 4 of the things listed.
Correct, and that's why we've got all 4 on the go, and why our plan is before the end of June to make sure that we can have those systems integrated so that they can share data. And so far we are on track. It's a Herculean task, yes, and the OAG is pointing that out. It's not without risks, but that's why we've got a crack team working on it and managing those risks.
How often is IT letting you down in the health system?
I think information systems are always a challenge, and particularly in a system as complex as the health system. We're not alone in that, but it is complex, and it is a really important part of our delivery of care every day for New Zealanders. Most of the time, it serves us extremely well.
Have you read this report?
Oh, yes, and I've even spoken directly with the Auditor-General yesterday morning ahead of the release today.
OK, because in the course of our conversation, it's kind of, it seems like you and the Auditor-General are completely at odds in terms of what the Auditor-General regards as significant risks, inadequacies, and things that you still need to work out.
Well, a couple of comments there. The Auditor-General is giving his independent view on it. I'm giving my view on it, and I'm quite close to the program, so I can give you it will be a different view on some respects. But the second point here is even on a week-by-week basis, things do change. And since the team came in and did a lot of the work on this, there's been a lot of work that's happened from the teams here in the ministry. So we found the report very helpful. We got an early heads up on the issues they were identifying, and we've worked to address those already.
So before you go, I need to ask you again, December, are you going to meet the deadline to have all those people eligible fully vaccinated by the end of December?
That's absolutely our ambition, and my hope is that every eligible Kiwi will come and take up the opportunity to be vaccinated.
Only a hope?
Well, my hope is that people will respond to the invitation. Our ambition is to make sure they have that opportunity, and we're on track to do that.
And that is the Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield. There were plenty of hugs, tears and cheers at Rarotonga International Airport today as the Cook Islands bubble finally opened. The first flight from Auckland left with almost 300 people on board to the tourist-starved destination. Our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nate McKinnon checked in with them and hopped on board.
Taitini has been waiting a long time for this day.
4 years ago, I come back, and then not long after that, and then the COVID. But now, I've got a chance to go.
For her, the first Cook Islands bubble flight marks the end of a 4-year wait to return to her birthplace. She had planned to go earlier, but COVID-19 ruined those plans. This will be an emotional trip. Tai can't wait to see her mum, now 92.
I think everybody's exciting. Not only the Cook Islanders and, and other tourists. It's a good thing. Give some money to the people back home.
Nat grows taro on one of the Cook Islands' outer islands. He made the trip to New Zealand before the bubble opened, marketing and selling his Cook Island taro in Auckland for the first time.
Yeah, I arrived last Wednesday to bring 100 bags of 20 kg of fresh taro from Cook Islands. First time ever.
The flight home is a little different for Nat. There were a smattering of passengers on his flight to Auckland. Today he'll be joined by nearly 300 others.
Yeah, I was on a standby outside because it's full,
Nuroa Rayner returns to New Zealand for his son's 21st.
He's in the army at the moment, so we're lucky to celebrate his 21st here.
He says COVID has crushed the Cook Island economy, but doesn't believe that's been a totally bad thing.
Our people back home are starting to grow for those who haven't with the downtime, so which is good. Getting them back into plantation, doing what they used to do before. So yeah, it's been good.
Tai, Nat and Nuroa, along with hundreds of other tourists and Cook Island natives, are welcomed to the departure gate with Rarotongan donuts and traditional song and dance. There are kisses, laughs and tears before a traditional Cook Island goodbye. And we're now just an hour and a half away from the Cook Islands. Air New Zealand's pulled out all the stops. We've just had breakfast, continental or hot, and as you can see, it's now time for champagne.
Yes, second wedding anniversary. Yeah, we got married over in Raro 2 years ago, so yeah, heading back for the first time and privileged to be on the first flight.
On the ground in Rarotonga, the queues snarled through security for the first time in over a year. There are hugs, tears and smiles of joy as families and friends reunite. This woman has been waiting for over a year to see her cousin-in-law.
She's been away since the lockdown. She lives here and because of the lockdown she couldn't come back.
And finally she arrives, overjoyed to be home and longing to see the rest of the family.
Well, I'm toggling both countries, but it's great to be back here. Got a house and family here. I can't wait to see the house. Can't wait to catch up with family. It's fantastic.
Prime Minister Mark Brown says he's confident the Cook Islands is ready for this bubble. He says there are a few more hard yards to get through, but he's happy the first step has been taken.
There was a significant cost to closing the borders, but the cost of lives was far greater for us.
As for vaccinations, they start now, with the Health Minister due to get his shot this evening. From the Cook Islands, for Checkpoint, Nick Trubridge.
And Nick Trubridge joins us live from Rarotonga. Nick, it's official bubble time, so where to now for the Cook Islands and its recovery?
Kia ora, Lisa. Yeah, well, I'm coming to you from Avarua district in the Cook Islands, which for those who aren't aware is the northern end of the island. We've got the Avarua foreshore to my left, the Avarua police station to my right. It doesn't Doesn't look like there's anyone in there, so I suppose that's a good thing. As for next steps, Lisa, so it's vaccine time in the Cook Islands. There were Pfizer vaccination or Pfizer shots on that flight that came over with us today. As I said in my package, the first step tonight is to get the health minister vaccinated, and then much like it was in New Zealand, Lisa, the next step after that is vaccinating the vaccinators. They then go on to, again, a similar sort of system to what we've seen back home in New Zealand, which is vaccinating people like border workers, and an important step in the nation's recovery, Lisa. Obviously, another of the important steps is tourism recovering. That will come along slowly. Flights will be slowly increased as the weeks go by, but first step is certainly vaccinations, and Prime Minister Mark Brown placing a lot of emphasis on that this afternoon, saying that is what he wants to see done first before flights really open up, before tourism really comes back.
So Nick, tell us a little bit about what you saw in those departure and arrival lounges today.
Yeah, well, it was, as I say, it was tears, it was hugs, it was yahoos, it was how are you, haven't seen you for a while. This morning I was telling my our colleague Nathan Raredi on First Up that there was a trolley coming towards me with an assortment of different pool noodles. So there were obviously people coming for a bit of a family trip for some much needed R&R after being locked down in New Zealand for a number of months. And of course family, many family reunions, many tears of joy. And yeah, lots of colours. Obviously, this is a nation of colour. There were plenty of floral shirts, plenty of sort of lava type decor, and in plenty of different colours. So look, the mood was certainly joyous overall. But as I say, attention now really switches to being able to work up capacity, really, to be able to allow more tourists from New Zealand to come over to Rarotonga, starting with vaccinations and then placing some emphasis on getting those tourism businesses back up and running.
Nick, on a lighter note, those people who are listening to you but can't see you, you're just in your shirt sleeves there, so let's just do a bit of an envy check here. What do you reckon the temperature is?
I reckon it's probably about 23, Nate, do we think at the moment, I would say? Yeah, probably about 23 degrees. And I'll tell you what, it's humid. It's really humid. So, I'm in long sleeves and pants tonight. I certainly won't be wearing my long PJs. I'll be in my boxer shorts at most, I would say, most likely, Lisa. But
okay, taiho there, Nick.
It's certainly warm and it's humid, but look, I'm not complaining.
Too much detail. Thanks so much. Nick Drewrich there joining us live from Rarotonga. Kia ora, e te iwi e haere ake nei e checkpoint. Businesses and Auckland councillors demand answers from Ports of Auckland bosses. A sports complex is considering whether it needs security guards after sideline violence at kids' netball, and two Manawatu towns feeling abandoned by their council. Homai o whakaro, do send us your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or do flick us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time for the headlines now with Marama.
Waikato District Health Board has confirmed it's been hit by a ransomware attack believed to have come from overseas. Hundreds of surgeries have been postponed at the region's 5 public hospitals because of the IT systems are down. The head of the DHB, Kevin Snee, told Checkpoint it received a message suggesting it's a ransomware attack, but there was no warning beforehand. Only operations where notes had already been printed out have been done today, and the nurses' organisation says it's an absolute nightmare with staff struggling to do their jobs. The Auditor-General doubts the government can meet its goal of vaccinating the entire country against COVID by the end of the year. John Ryan's review says the lack of vaccinators poses a significant risk. He's worried about supply, and some parts of the plan, including IT systems, are not complete. The COVID-19 Minister Chris Hipkins says more work has been done since the review. The government plans to urgently amend legislation to ensure the Pfizer vaccine rollout is lawful, despite it being approved under the Medicines Act. The High Court has ruled that the current law should be used only for a limited number of patients. The COVID-19 Response Minister, Chris Hipkins, says it has highlighted a technical anomaly but raises no safety issues. Businesses say delays at ports of Auckland are continuing to cost them and their customers, with some companies refusing to use the port. Auckland business owner Sophia Bristow says the shipping companies she uses will not take goods to Auckland because of the congestion. Instead, they go to Tauranga first, taking an extra 5 weeks and costing more. A worker at New Zealand's High Commission in New Delhi who has died of COVID-19 had worked there since Sir Edmund Hillary was High Commissioner in 1986. The man, an Indian citizen, died in hospital 3 days ago, and the Foreign Minister Nanaia Mahuta says staff did all they could to care for him. 6 other people in the compound tested positive, but none are symptomatic, and 3 have since tested negative. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back at 6 with more.
Kia ora rā iho. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, called Lisa Owen tēnei. Let's get to the business news now with Nicholas Poynton. Nicholas, a Kiwi tech company, someone's snapped it up, an overseas investor?
Yeah, this has become a bit of a regular theme this year. The Dunedin-based firm Timely, now they have created a booking software which is used by beauty salons and spas. It offers its services in New Zealand, Australia and the UK. It's been snapped up by a US-based firm called EverCommerce. Now, this firm has been held in quite high regard by most accounts, previously featuring Deloitte's top 50 New Zealand tech firms. Now, we weren't told how much EverCommerce actually paid for Timely, but the deal does need approval from the Overseas Investment Office, and that has a threshold of $100 million, which suggests that this is going to be a pretty profitable sale for the company's founders and its shareholders, which include the likes of local firms such as venture capital firms such as Movac and Punakaiki funds. Now, EverCommerce, its background is providing software solutions, as they call it, for small businesses, and their plans for Timely is to really expand the products it offers, but also expand its reach within the markets that it currently operates in. And this is actually the 4th technology company this year that's been sold to an overseas investor. About 9 months ago, I did a story where I was speaking to people who had a fear that overseas investment in our local firms would actually grind to a halt because of closed borders. I mean, people would be unable to actually come to New Zealand and do those face-to-face sort of due diligence meetings. But, as we've seen, that clearly has not been the case. There's been plenty of overseas money sloshing about, looking for promising sort of startups to pour their money into. And it's quite clear that also we have plenty of these sorts of firms available. But one of the questions this raises is, why can't our local investors sort of scrape together or put together significant deals to actually keep these firms in New Zealand ownership and keep their profits within our borders? And I guess the counterpoint to that that's often put out there is, it doesn't matter if these firms are overseas. These cashed up founders, they're likely to actually go out and reinvest that money in other startups. But look, we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, flip side then. Let's talk about Villa Maria. What's going on there? Yeah, the parent company which owns Villa Maria, that's FFWL, they've been placed into receivership by Rabobank and ANZ. And it's not known how much is owed. The details will be made public after the receivers put together their report. It's due to be out in a couple of months' time. But FFWL is 100% owned by Sir George Fistenich, whose family is widely regarded as being one of the real pioneers of the New Zealand wine industry. And one of the receivers, Brendan Gibson from Calibre Partners, he has stressed that Villa Maria's domestic and international business has been unaffected by the receiverships. The wine giant continues to trade profitably. It's the shareholder, it's FFWL that's gone into receivership. And one of the key pieces of context to really keep in mind here, and this may sort of suggest about what happens next, is that it's been no secret that Villa Maria has been looking for ways to get capital into its business over the past 6 months. Late last year, they sold some land in South Auckland to raise capital, and earlier this year it was reported by Australian media that it had appointed a Swiss investment bank to go out and test the market, see what sort of appetite there was to either buy the business or for someone to come along and take a significant stake in it. And Brendan Gibson from Calibre Partners, he says that placing FFWL into receivership, taking control of its assets, will likely bring the whole sales process to a conclusion. He says he's been busy sort of assessing the business's position in the market. He's also been hitting the phones to sort of re-engage with prospective buyers, which sort of suggests that those talks had actually previously stalled, but they appear to be now back up and running. And you sort of get the sense from all of this that the sale of the company could be imminent. And look, a number of names have been sort of tied to this company. Plenty of overseas buyers. One local name has been the Apple Exporter Scales Corporation. But we're just going to have to wait and see what happens here. But we may see something in the next coming weeks. Who knows?
OK, let's take a quick whip around all the numbers today.
The NZX closed up 18 points today to 12,429. Didn't forget that number today. And the dollar is at 72.3 US cents and 93 Australian.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with business. Check your receipts. A computer glitch at dozens of supermarkets yesterday meant shoppers did not get the discounts that were advertised on the shelf. If you were shopping at Pack 'n Save, New World or Foursquare anywhere in the North Island on Monday, you might have been overcharged. Supermarket company Foodstuffs says about a quarter of the week's special prices failed to register at the checkout. Consumer CEO John Duffy joins me now. John, how big a botch up is this, do you think?
This is a pretty significant issue. There are a number of foodstuff supermarkets around the North Island, so there'll be a large amount of people affected. Foodstuffs regularly runs a significant number of specials across a week, so to have 25% of those specials out there with the wrong prices is a significant issue.
So what are people's rights here?
Well, it's a little bit murky. It kind of depends on what Foodstuffs has done to notify consumers that there might be an issue. And Foodstuffs hasn't really fronted on this issue, so we don't know exactly what happened, how quickly they took action, and indeed what action they took. We've seen some news reports that they put some A4 sheets of paper up in the entrances of their stores. In my mind, that's not really good enough to alert consumers that there is an issue. But if consumers knew that there was a problem, then they could have been alerted to that and queried things at the point of sale, so at the checkout. If they were unaware of the problem, they wouldn't necessarily know that there was any issue. They wouldn't know to collect their receipt. And without proof of purchase, it may be very difficult for consumers to then turn around and go, well, I was charged $5 extra for, I don't know, my bacon or whatever it was that week, that day, and go back and get a refund.
Yeah, so that is, I don't know about you, John, but supermarket receipts, I tend to be a bit slack with them. They end up in the bottom of a shopping bag and then in the bin. So if you have binned your receipt, is there absolutely no hope that you can get any of the savings back, or are we relying on the stores to maybe proactively put it right, give you credit or something?
Well, it also relies on you knowing what items are on special. So what could happen here, and it's unclear because Foodstuffs, again, hasn't fronted on this, is whether New World customers who use their one card have been proactively contacted by Foodstuffs and told that they've been overcharged. So I guess one of the upsides of the mountains of data that Foodstuffs collecting on its customers as they do their shopping is that if you've used your one card as part of your shop, they know who you are, they know how to contact you, and they know that you've purchased one of the items that wasn't loaded correctly. So I would expect at the very least that Foodstuffs is proactively contacting those customers and offering them a refund.
So what they have done is put out a statement. It has limited details, as you've touched on, but it says, actually, interestingly, that the severity of the incident and the fact that there was a technical issue was identified at 5:30 a.m. on Monday, so before the stores opened. So what onus was there on them to put it right, really, before they threw open the doors to customers?
Well, I guess it depends on their systems and the severity of the issue. We don't know. It could have been an issue that involved technical experts coming in and fixing databases and that kind of thing. So it's not necessarily unreasonable for it to have taken a number of hours to fix. What is unreasonable is if they didn't let people know and knowingly sold them products at a misleading price. That's really problematic. And, let's keep in mind, this isn't the first time that, there has been issues with, in particular, Pack 'n Save stores having different prices at the till compared to what's on the shelf. So Pack 'n Save in Mangere was prosecuted last year and fined $70,000 for breaching the Fair Trading Act for exactly that type of behaviour.
So does the parent company here, Foodstuffs, need to front up and let customers know exactly what went wrong and what their options are now?
Look, I think given the large number of people who could be affected by this, I think that's the only reasonable course of action.
Thanks for your time this evening. That is John Duffy, the Consumer CEO. Now, in a statement, Foodstuffs says pricing issues like this one are extremely rare, and it has systems and processes in place to identify them early. It sincerely apologises to any customers affected and is encouraging them to contact the store where they have shopped so any discrepancies can be put right. Interested in your thoughts on that one? Do you keep your receipt after you've been to the supermarket? Text us on 2101 or tweet us at checkpointrnz.co.nz. Business owners say they've been forced to pay more and risk breaching contracts because they can't get goods into ports of Auckland. Goods are being rerouted to Tauranga and arriving 5 weeks later. Something that's been happening for months with no end in sight. It's highlighted the significant problems, current and future, that face the Auckland ports as the city grows. And it's highlighted a report which made waves and was then shelved, recommending a move to Northport. Jordan Bond reports.
Sophia Bristow of Eurotech Design says their shipping company is refusing to go to our biggest city's port in Auckland, instead rerouting to Tauranga. She says it affects them, the businesses they supply and their customers. Things take 5 weeks longer and cost more.
It does make their business more difficult because end consumers are not quite ready to accept the price increase or the increase at the amount that we have experienced and we're trying to pass on.
She says for commercial jobs, delays mean risking contract breaches and put a lot of money on the line. The future of the port has been well canvassed. The government's decided it's not fit for purpose long term and is trying to decide where to put it. It's commissioned report after study after feasibility and is still no closer to a decision. Former six-term Waitakere Mayor Sir Bob Harvey says we need someone to make a strong decision rather than letting it wither.
It's just a matter of visionary leadership. That's what I think may be missing in this conversation, to take the opportunity that exists.
Sir Bob says Auckland would take a leap forward if the port's 77 hectares, among the most valuable land in the city, were opened up to development and residents.
I'm sympathetic to the ports, and we've got to be careful and treat them with a bit of bloody kindness. But I think they know, and we know, they will move, and they should move. And I think we've got to do that well, we've got to do it with integrity, and we've got to do it with Auckland's trust.
Former Far North Mayor Wayne Brown is a major advocate for moving the port to Northland. He led a study for the government which ended up recommending that option. He says it's clearly the best of the bunch. It'd reduce congestion and emissions by using rail. The land would be returned for Aucklanders' use and Northport can handle the upgrade. Mr Brown, who's an engineer, says we can't keep kicking the can down the road.
A lot of politicians would like to have the idea that it's 30 years away, so they don't have to actually do anything. It isn't. It's 8 years away before it's completely useless, this port, and it's already failing.
He says there are a lot better things we could do than have used cars and empty containers taking up the city's most expensive land. And that would take some political courage.
We've got to stop being incrementalists. We don't have a port strategy in a maritime nation. It's just crazy. It's unjustifiable. And if the port wasn't in Auckland, you could never come up with a case to put it there.
The most recent government study by independent consultant Sapere found none of the options had net positive economic impacts. These ranged from expanding Northport and or Tauranga to building completely new ports in Manukau or the Firth of Thames. The government now wants another report, a nationwide study into freight. That's expected to take another 12 to 18 months to produce. It's a question of how long businesses can continue to put up with a major piece of infrastructure the government knows isn't working. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Jordan Bond, aho.
Ports of Auckland bosses have fronted up to frustrated Auckland councillors this afternoon as freight and logistics delays continue to affect businesses across the country. Ports Chief Executive Tony Gibson presented their latest quarterly report to Auckland Council, the port's sole shareholder. And Mayor Phil Goff wasted no time in demanding answers.
When on your latest estimates will automation be fully rolled out?
At this stage, we are not saying what date, because what we have to do is meet those 4 criteria that I've just mentioned, and we will not move forward. And we've said until such time as we meet those criteria, we're not afraid to delay if it means a delay.
But you must have in your mind when that is likely to happen. We were told, I think you said in March, that it would be by the latest July. I presume now it will be longer than that. Is that correct?
We're not sure. And again, we've got those 4 criteria, the CHAS NZ Safety Assurance Program. We will have an indication by the end of the week how long that will take. But again, software stability, productivity, and people changes are crucial. So we're not giving a specific date.
But are we talking about 6 months? Are we talking about 8 months? So just a broad indication, because I presume you've discussed with your board when likely you'll see the full rollout.
Yeah, look, if provided those 4 criteria are met, we think we're probably looking somewhere around August.
Speed isn't the only concern for the ports. A damning health and safety report was released earlier this year, and investigations into a death and injuries at the port remain unresolved. The Maritime Union says they've struggled to get ports bosses to return their emails at times. But Ports Chair Bill Osborne told councillors they need more trust.
Well, let me just go first. So I was not prepared to meet with the union while they were throwing grenades at our CEO in public when we're in the middle of a negotiation for our collective.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman of the board, I have no idea what you mean.
Well, let's just be clear. At the time we're in the middle of this collective agreement, the Maritime Union are going to the media and are demanding that chief executives resigns and things like that. Now, you can't have a relationship of trust when one party's throwing grenades over the fence and taking personal attacks at one of our people.
And that was Ports of Auckland's Chairman, Bill Osborne. We'd love your feedback on this one. If you're a business affected by some of the delays, or if you've managed to get your goods quick and easy, let us know. Text us on 2101, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. It is 6 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He moriaki e ngā pita kōrero after the news at 6. Migrants hit back at the so-called immigration reset. A long-serving staff member at the New Zealand High Commission in New Delhi has died of COVID-19. The Indian staff member started working at the Commission in 1986 when Sir Edmund Hillary was High Commissioner. He died in hospital on the 16th of May. Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta says she was deeply saddened to learn of the staff member's death.
Our thoughts and aroha are with the family at this time. Any loss of life is extremely sad, and I know that the MFAT whānau will be grieving at this time, and they need time to process what has happened under extenuating circumstances of this global pandemic.
She says New Zealand will provide support to his family.
Right now, the immediate support is around processing what has actually happened and supporting the whānau in terms of burial preparations and the like.
And the High Commission recently apologised for asking for an oxygen cylinder via Twitter to help locally hired staff. Now to the sad story of 2 towns nobody seems to want. Opiki and Tokomaru residents in the Manawatu want to break away from their current council, which they say has neglected them for years, and forge a new future with Palmerston North. They feel more connected to Palmy, they work, shop and go to school there, and say it's only right their rates are paid to that council as well. But there's just one catch. Palmy doesn't want them. Emma Hatton and visual journalist Samuel Rillstone took a trip to the mighty Manawatu to see what the story is.
Just south of Palmerston North, deep in rural Manawatu, a sign on State Highway 57 reads, "Horowhenua, are you moving here?" Ironically, 2 of the district's settlements are planning quite the opposite. Christine Toms lives in Tokomaru, about 20 minutes drive from Palmerston North. Residents here pay rates to the Horowhenua District Council, but they consider Palmy to be their city.
It's closer. It's basically on our doorstep. It's longer to go to live in. None of our schools go to live in. There are no school buses to live in.
Locals feel abandoned by the Horowhenua District Council and want to come under the wing of Palmerston North City Council. But she says neither seem to want them.
A bit like the Romanovs, the Russians in 1918. They couldn't stay, but nobody wanted them either. And we find ourselves in the same thing, really. It's ridiculous. It's the farmers I feel particularly sorry for, because they are paying huge rates. Their rates are about the highest in the country, and they get nothing.
The majority of the 154 submissions to the Local Government Commission say similar things: a lack of investment from the Horowhenua Council and a stronger connection to Palmerston North.
The proposal would see the boundary shift here to Okuku Road and Kingston Road, just north of Shannon. The change would see 1,400 residents and about 500 houses move into the Palmerston North District.
Mrs Toms is part of the group that put forward this proposal back in 2018. The Commission will meet on Thursday to decide whether or not to change the boundary. But neither council nor the local iwi support it. Palmerston North's Mayor Grant Smith says the settlements will cost his city too much and it's not fair on existing ratepayers.
Investment was huge, whether it be waters, lighting, footpaths, public halls, roading, big one with roading. It would be a lot of subsidisation from other ratepayers of Palmerston North.
Meanwhile, the Mayor of Horowhenua District Council, Bernie Wandin, rejects the idea that Opiki and Tokomaru have been neglected, saying compared to the rates take, it gets a good proportion of investment. He says the settlements belong with Horowhenua.
The rural part of that district has much more alignment with the Horowhenua District Council than it did with Palmerston. And of course, to be honest, if we had said, oh yes, we support them going, I don't think it would have been actually a very good look in terms of us not being able to cater for that part of the district at all.
Dairy farmer Braden Whitelock is on 800 hectares at Linton. About 3/4 of his farm falls under Palmerston North and the rest under Horowhenua. This puts him literally on the fence. But he says he can't make a decision because there's still big question marks from both councils over what their plans are for long-term infrastructure, in particular the wastewater system.
It's a bit like buying a car. If you go to buy a car, you need to know how much it is, which relates to the rates. You need to know the colour, the availability and a lot of information. So it's the same thing that I'm seeking. And sorry, but my conversation's more about the nature cause of what and may happen there with both Palmerston North City and Horowhenua being affected parties.
Nature Calls is Palmerston North's consultation over wastewater, and all options on the table will require massive investment when the current consents expire soon.
The boundary is important, but until we get the information on Nature Calls, we can't have a meaningful decision.
Nevertheless, a decision is imminent. An answer has been promised by the Local Government Commission by the end of this month. In Palmerston North and Horowhenua, for Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
After 6, we'll have violence on the sidelines at Kids Sport.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Marama Tipole. The Waikato District Health Board has confirmed it is the subject of a ransomware attack, and it may be a couple of days at least before things are back to normal. The attack has forced the shutdown of all internal IT systems, including computers and phones at the region's 5 public hospitals. The board's chief executive, Kevin Snee, says it has received a message suggesting this is a ransomware attack, but at this stage, no specific amount of money has been asked for.
When these events happen, as they happen in other parts of the world, people are trying to extract money from an organisation. Clearly, we will not be paying any ransom for this, but that's what people are trying to do when they put viruses like this into the system.
Deborah Powell of the Resident Doctors Association says the attack has caused chaos in all departments.
Doctors, for instance, are swapping personal cell phone numbers so they can get hold of each other. Discharging is becoming a real nightmare. We're having to write discharge summaries by hand. Clinics they're being stymied because we rely on our electronic patient notes, and if we don't have that, then clinics really can't operate.
RNZ's been told some operations have still been done today, but only those where notes had been printed out earlier. However, people in Waikato are being told to stay away from emergency departments unless absolutely necessary. The COVID-19 Response Minister, Chris Hipkins, remains optimistic all adults will be vaccinated against the virus by the end of the year, despite a major report suggesting otherwise. After reviewing the government's rollout plan, the Auditor-General is casting doubt on whether the deadline will be met. John Ryan is citing concerns about such matters as the supply chain and the number of vaccinators. He says the government needs a better contingency plan in case it doesn't get all the doses it expects. Mr Hipkins says he has never said the December deadline is a total guarantee, but is still optimistic it can be met. The Mayor of Hastings says she's proud of her council for deciding to add Māori seats. All but 2 of the 15 councillors voted for the wards this afternoon. The council got more than 2,000 responses when it asked for community feedback on the idea. 76% of those respondents wanted the wards. Sandra Hazelhurst told today's meeting a stronger and happier community will come from this.
Today isn't about process. Today isn't about how many numbers. Today is about what is true and what is right for our people, for the future, not for us sitting here today.
Sandra Hazelhurst says 3 Māori wards are likely to be added to the council. For the third time, the US has blocked a UN Security Council statement calling for a cessation of violence in Israel and Gaza. The text also calls for the protection of civilians, especially children. White House spokesperson Jen Psaki says behind-the-scenes talks is the best approach.
Our calculation at this point is that having those conversations behind the scenes, weighing in with our important strategic partnership we have with Israel, also with other countries in the region, is the most constructive approach we can take. So our approach is through quiet, intensive diplomacy, and that's where we feel we can be most effective.
The Canterbury businessman who was called out for his racist remarks against Māori is quitting his brewing company after apologising to the country last week for his social media comment and seeking legal advice. David Gawn has decided to resign. He told RNZ he will step down as director of Eagle Brewing and transfer his shareholding to his wife Marilyn. He also says she has decided to end their marriage. It's 4 minutes past 6. The chair of the Rugby Players Association, former All Black captain David Kirk, says leading players will walk away from New Zealand rugby if the Silver Lake deal goes ahead. The national body is offering to meet with the association later this week so the latter can outline its Forsyth Bar proposal for a public share float. The two sides are at loggerheads over the deal, whereby NZR intends selling 12.5% of its commercial rights to the US private equity firm for $387 million. Kirk says there's a strong depth of opposition to the deal among All Blacks.
Some of the players have already said to us, I don't want to play. I want to lace up my boots and play for a 12.5% owned commercial co. I think we can do it ourselves. I mean, in a way, feeling like we've reached a point where we can't go forward unless we get global private equity to help us drive the game. It's just not true.
The heavyweight unification bout between British boxing champions Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua has been thrown into doubt now that an American judge has ordered Fury to fight Deontay Wilder. The two had been due to fight last year, but the bout was delayed by COVID-19. After months of negotiation, a judge has ruled they must fight before September 15th, which jeopardises the long-awaited title showdown between Fury and Joshua. The world's top 2 heavyweights had been due to fight on August the 14th. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Tony Stamp samples the latest offering from the Chills, along with a solo effort from former Electric Wire hustler Mara TK. Auckland University raises the bar on the admissibility in court of evidence gathered undercover, while our sociolinguist Dr. Julia Debress is back looking for regional differences in New Zealand English. You just know Southland's going to get a mention. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday, Northland to Vanuatu, including Coromandel Peninsula and the central high country. Showers easing tomorrow. Bay of Plenty fine, but the chance of a shower in the west tomorrow morning. Gisborne to Wairarapa, isolated showers, mainly about the ranges, otherwise fine. Severe westerly gales for some exposed places today. Horowhenua to Wellington, fine. Bulla and Westland showers, clearing for southern Westland tomorrow afternoon. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, Southern Lakes, Central and North Otago, mainly fine. Isolated showers in Central Otago and Southern Lakes, clearing tomorrow morning. Westerly gales about northern Nelson and Marlborough Sounds today. Dunedin, Clutha, Southland and Fiordland showers with snow down to 200 metres tomorrow morning, clearing for eastern areas tomorrow. Southwest gales about coastal Southland and Otago today. For the Chatham Islands, periods of rain, possibly thundery, easing tomorrow afternoon. And I do have weather for Rarotonga, confirmed, Lisa. It is 23 degrees, as Nick said. Fine, but brief showers.
Kia ora rā, marama. We won't talk about Nick and his boxes, I don't think. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, called Lisa Owen, TNA. Migrants have hit back at the so-called immigration reset, saying it uses them as a scapegoat for problems with housing, infrastructure and worker welfare. The government signalled a change of direction with cuts to the number of incoming temporary migrants and a focus on attracting more highly skilled workers instead. Katie Todd reports.
The Great Immigration Reset, announced by Minister for Economic Development Stuart Nash last night, is tipped as a solution to the country's housing and wage woes. He says temporary visas should only be considered for genuine skill shortages, and the skilled migrant category will be reviewed. Details on what that might mean are yet to come, but his words have prompted anger and uncertainty among those already in the country, stuck in residency queues. Among them, an aged care worker who came to New Zealand from South Africa in 2018 and has been waiting a year. She works hard, looking after 90-year-olds every day, and her daughter's just fallen in love. She's begging the government not to pull the rug out from under them.
We sold everything. We sold everything for a dream that was sold to us. And we brought into New Zealand with our eyes wide open. Canada is calling for immigrants. France is even offering very essential workers who worked during the pandemic residency. But all of a sudden, we've gone from essential workers to low-skilled workers overnight. And we wonder if we made the biggest mistake of our lives. And we question every day, how is this government being kind to migrants?
It's not just migrants in low and mid-skills categories struggling to make sense of the immigration speech. Aaron Davis and his partner moved from London to New Zealand at the start of last year. He's a professor of political communication at Victoria University, and she's a doctor on the Kapiti coast, both recognised as highly skilled professions. The expressions of interest visa pool which they plan to apply for has been closed since the onset of COVID-19, and he fears it will take years to get permanent residency. In the meantime, his 2 teenage children can't get jobs and can't go to university without paying international fees.
And that's our great concern. Our great concern is our teenagers who struggled coming over. They struggled under COVID and they've struggled adapting to a new country. There's lots of things they like about it and they'd like to stay, but the idea of them staying at home for years at a time would force us probably to go home.
Mr Davis fears many families are in the same situation. He says the government hasn't acknowledged the humanitarian crisis unfolding on its doorstep.
I think there's a general lack of trust across the immigrant population about what the government says and what it's going to do. So even if you are a highly skilled immigrant and have jobs and contribute, we're unsure whether the government will ever process visas.
In justifying an immigration shake-up, Stuart Nash says some sectors are relying on or exploiting low-paid workers, while pressure on housing and infrastructure shows a need to get ahead of population growth. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says New Zealand won't be turning off the tap for low-skilled migrants, but she says it's important to look at the population growth and ask if it's serving both migrants and New Zealanders.
For those migrants who are coming to call New Zealand home, are we giving them the best offering possible, and
And at scale, with the number of temporary workers New Zealand's accessing at the moment, is that best for wages and New Zealand's economy?
Migrant Workers Association spokesperson Anu Carlotti describes the immigration reset as shocking and absurd. She agrees migrants are exploited and paid lower wages, but the number of migrants isn't what needs to change. It's the rules which bind them to a single employer in order to be sponsored. Ms Carlotti believes the government's unfairly blaming migrant workers for housing and infrastructure issues, which stem from years of underinvestment from both sides of the political spectrum.
Blaming migrants for the housing crisis, for infrastructure problems, for transport, for lowering wages, that is plain migrant scapegoating.
The Prime Minister has pledged to work with sectors which rely on migrant workers to offset any labour shortages. For Checkpoint, ko Katie Todd, tēnei.
Sexual abuse survivors say the ACC claims process is broken. Figures revealed today show almost nobody makes it through the system with approval. Only 5% of sexual abuse claims are approved, and those who make it through say the process is traumatising, frustrating and long. They say the system needs a complete overhaul. Ben Strang reports.
RNZ has heard from many sexual abuse survivors who all say the ACC assessment process is traumatic and unnecessary. One such survivor, who RNZ has agreed not to name to protect her privacy, was assessed for post-traumatic stress disorder and approved for ACC in the past, but has to now be reassessed after another incident that has re-triggered her. She says her case manager can't tell her why an appointment date is taking so long.
And I said to him, do you want me to ring around? Is there something I can do? And he goes, no, it's his admin team that has to do it. I don't understand why it's taking so long just to get an appointment date.
The woman says when she did this process just over 5 years ago, although hard, it was quicker. She says going through the process again is punishing.
My frustration is I didn't ask to be abused. It's something that has happened to me, but I feel like I'm still paying the price. And now having to do an assessment again, I've got to revisit everything that's happened to me.
She understands completely why people don't stick with it, but urges them to, because it's their right.
Don't give up. Fight it. You've suffered enough. Just, I know it's a hard system and that, but it's something that you're entitled to.
Another survivor who recently did get approved for a claim and spoke on the condition of anonymity says the process was incredibly stressful.
It's just devastating. You're going through this process where basically an egg beater is being stuck in your brain once a week while you're recounting memories or you're going through, exercises, and the whole time you're like, this may not even be worth it.
She says the system isn't fit for purpose.
And that just comes down to the fact that ACC, the system, is based on an insurance system, and that doesn't work for survivors of sexual assault. Our experiences should be enough, and they shouldn't have to be based on the Crimes Act, which is completely outdated.
She says the system can't be fixed and needs a complete overhaul. Dr. Paul Skirrow of the College of Clinical Psychologists says the ACC statistics are unsurprising and the process can be extremely hard and stigmatising.
The main issue with ACC is that they're set up as an insurance model and they have this very clear criteria which is around mental injury, which they have to assess as an insurer. They have to assess if you've got one of those and they have to be reasonably confident that that's to do with a sexual assault that you had. So the whole assessment process is quite in-depth and quite difficult for people.
But Dr. Skirrow says the ACC is doing some good things and says it should be praised for some of the pre-cover supports it has recently put in place. ACC Minister Carmel Sepuloni defended her department, saying it gives out up to 14 hours of therapy, 10 hours of cultural support, 10 hours of social work support and 20 hours of whānau support before deciding to undergo a formal assessment. Dr. Skirrow says those pre-cover supports are good developments, but long delays mean they don't always cover enough.
the hard part that we've got at the minute is there's just not really enough skilled people to do these assessments. So there's not enough psychologists in the country to kind of complete all of these assessments and the support that people need to get to the assessments. And there's not enough psychiatrists either. So it often takes people a long, long time to get through. And, you know, your mental health may deteriorate in that time while you're waiting.
Dr Skiro urged people to continue coming forward for support in dealing with sexual assaults and says the ACC should always be looking to improve how it deals with claims. For Checkpoint, Ben Strang.
It is 16 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. An alleged hammer attack on the sidelines of a kids' netball game has one sports centre thinking about extra security. Police are investigating after the incident at the Tauranga Netball Centre on Saturday afternoon, where two men allegedly got into a fight. Bystanders intervened to calm the situation. Several teams of primary and intermediate aged children were playing at the time. Tauranga Netball Centre manager Tracy Walters describes the scene.
It was an isolated incident that happened between two individuals that knew each other, and it pretty much just turned violent. Yeah.
How so?
One individual I know did have a hammer, and I'm unsure if the other individual had a weapon or not.
Was anyone hurt, Tracy?
Well, I believe the guy that got hit by the hammer was hurt, but he didn't need immediate medical attention. So we just encouraged them to go their own way and sort of stop whatever was happening.
Are you talking about two male spectators?
Yes.
Okay. What did the crowd do? Did people intervene or how did they react?
There were a lot of fathers there that came to the aid of staff members, and when I say the aid came, because nobody else got hurt, when I say came to the aid, they sort of just stood around for a while to make sure that the two individuals didn't sort of come back together. I mean, I've worked here for the last 4 years and I've never seen anything like that. You know, let's put it this way, it happened fast, but unfortunately the children that were in the immediate area did see, you know, something that you wouldn't really want them to see. And then it was finished.
So what's happening then in respect of the kids?
The police were contacted shortly after the incident happened by probably quite a number of people around the courts on that day. The police attended the Tauranga Netball courts and interviewed a number of people regarding the incident. That is currently under investigation. What we're doing is working with the police and awaiting their report and the identification of these individuals so that we can then take steps to issue a trespass notice so that, you know, pretty much they're no longer welcome down at the courts. And also to progress talks with the police around, you know, victim support that's going to be allowed for whoever feels they need it. So comms have gone out to our 5,000 plus database, and they have been advised that those steps are going to be taken. And if they do feel that their children or themselves would like some victim support in regards to the incident that happened, they are to contact me, and then I can put them onto the right people.
So, Tracy, it's the intention to ban these individuals from being at the courts?
Yes.
And do you know, is that a permanent ban?
Well, that will be something that will probably be discussed at board level. For now, my role would be to ensure that in the immediate future they would not be around the courts.
And so this weekend, will it be netball as usual at the complex?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Are you anticipating that some people might feel a little bit anxious?
Well, you know, the communication to go out to, like, the whole database, we have had a lot of really positive feedback around how the situation was handled, and, you know, that they were very supportive of what happened. We've had a couple of people say that they are concerned and have sort of suggested that we get security. That obviously is a cost to us. So will have to be discussed again at board level in terms of, if we would take those steps, and if we do, how we would pay for that. So it's probably something that all sports around Blake Park on a Saturday might want to collaborate with in terms of security, as there's, thousands and thousands of people down there on a Saturday during the winter.
And that's Tracy Walters, who is the centre manager at the Tauranga Netball Centre. National MPs are singing from different song sheets, with some now throwing their support behind Māori co-governance and targeted funding. Leader Judith Collins has been accusing the government of trying to create two systems by stealth. Here's political reporter Katie Scotcher.
National MPs backing their leader, who for weeks has been questioning the government's plans for Māori.
It's just asking fair questions.
What I think we need to be doing is ensuring that we're having open and transparent discussions about the future of New Zealand. Our concern is that is not happening, and I think Judith has done a really good job on highlighting that.
She is being careful to say we should have constitutional discussions openly and honestly.
In opposition, you need to ask the questions, and that's what we're doing.
But that's where the consistency ends. After National leaked a report that sets out a roadmap to co-governance between the Crown and Māori by 2040, Judith Collins has been running the line about a separatist agenda. But it appears her MPs aren't on the same page.
Do I think Māori have a role in governing New Zealand? Absolutely. Do I think that they have interests in a whole range of different things, like water, for example? Then yes, of course. So, yes, in principle is the answer.
Well, I think we should explore co-governance models.
Ms Collins has been clear about government funding too, saying it should target need, not race.
In terms of making it easier based on ethnicity, that's not the issue. The issue is, does someone need a house? If they do, the government should be prepared to step up.
Another MP, this time Simon Bridges, again on a different page.
Of course we think there should be targeted funding. Look, that's been National's approach now for decades, and we would want to see that continue.
And it doesn't end there. Ms Collins claimed at the weekend the government plans to reform the South Island's publicly owned water assets, and Ngāi Tahu is in line to take over 50% ownership. But this was quickly denied by Ngāi Tahu, who accused the National leader of seeking headlines. Ms Collins says she hasn't spoken to the iwi since, but according to MP Nicola Willis, someone has.
I understand there have been conversations with Ngāi Tahu.
Judith Collins has been under pressure after a poor personal showing in Sunday's poll, dropping almost 13 points in the preferred Prime Minister stakes to be on 5.6%. She's adamant she's not going anywhere, but her MP Tim van der Molen doesn't seem so convinced.
At the moment, Judith Collins is our leader, and I absolutely support her.
At the moment. A tuiti whare parimata mō te ho taka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scott Churaho.
A few of you have got in touch about the Auditor General's report into the rollout, the national rollout of the COVID vaccine. That report identifies a number of risk factors and concerns. This listener says the big question around the vaccine rollout that the government must address is, what is the staged reopening plan? If over 50s are all vaccinated, for example, what is the risk to the rest of the population? How does that compare to meningitis, for example? Is that worth the cost to stay closed? Lindsay's got in touch to say government website directs us to DHB websites. There is no detail about Group 3 in the Southern DHB apart from some locations. There is only one stated for all of Dunedin, no booking system. How can I have confidence without information, says Lindsay. Well, Taiwan has been one of the most successful countries in controlling the spread of COVID-19. However, a rapid spread of cases in the last week has prompted two of the island's biggest cities to shut schools and advise people to work from home. The BBC's Cindy Sue has the details.
Sunrise in the capital Taipei.
Up until recently, this was the norm in Taiwan. Streets full of rush hour traffic, people heading to work or school, unlike in many places around the world. But in recent days, shoppers panic buying have become common as government officials order tough new restrictions in 2 of Taiwan's biggest cities.
We require mask wearing at all times when going out. Avoid unnecessary outings, activities or gatherings. Stop gatherings at home or social gatherings of more than 5 people indoors and more than 10 people outdoors.
Taipei and New Taipei's mayors have also ordered all schools and childcare centers to close for 2 weeks starting Tuesday. It comes as the central government had already ordered public venues such as sports centers and movie theaters, as well as bars, to shut down temporarily. Until now, Taiwan had avoided such measures by acting fast last year, banning almost all foreigners from entering during the early days of the pandemic and requiring Taiwanese returning from abroad to undergo strict quarantine on arrival. These early actions and efficient contact tracing had helped the island avoid widespread community transmissions. Its hospitals were never overwhelmed, but now beds at isolation wards are quickly filling up, and there have even been infections spread at some hospitals. The sharp rise in cases over the past week, including clusters of infections involving airline pilots, Taiwanese people returning from abroad, as well as staff and customers at hostess tea houses, has got officials worried. And with the rising cases, there has been renewed criticism that the government has failed to impose mass testing or prioritize vaccinations, enabling the virus to spread more easily among the population. The fear now is that the number of cases will keep rising, and Taiwan, which has so far escaped the severity of a lockdown, may end up doing just that.
Cindy Sue reporting. At 111 years and 124 days old, Dexter Kruger has become Australia's oldest man ever. Dexter is a former livestock farmer from rural Queensland, and with all that experience of living on the planet, he had a few wise words to share. The BBC's Fahana Dawood went to meet him.
I'll just keep on living from day to day. Take one day at a time. Make the best of it.
Sage advice from the centenarian who's seen a lot of life and is media savvy, giving a number of interviews over the years celebrating his age. Born on January 13, 1910, before telephones or refrigeration, Mr. Kruger has lived through world wars, droughts, depressions and pandemics. Every day he completes a strict morning exercise regime while listening to the news on the radio and works on his latest book, a chronicle of the century he has spent on the planet.
I've written 300 stories and they were all packed in my mind, gathered over 100 years.
And there's an additional dietary tip he credits for his longevity.
Chicken brains. You know, chickens have a head and in there's some brains. And they are delicious little things. There's only one little bite.
And for those maybe not too keen on that delicacy, Mr. Kruger's advice is simply to eat good food. It seems to have worked for him as he looks forward to turning 112.
Fahana Dawood reporting there. A few of you have got in touch around the ports of Auckland that is, and continual problems and concerns about health and safety there and also the supply line. Elliot says, I've been stockpiling supplies since January this year to manage upcoming summer trading. And Elliot's a small business owner. Another person says, I work in supply chain and logistics, and it is well known within the industry that Ports of Auckland is problematic to deal with and has been for a number of years. It is inefficient, they say. Another person says consumers have no idea what is coming in regards to costs. The global transport chain is under a huge amount of stress. It's completely broken, they say. On the subject of supermarkets, and this is in respect to New World and Pack and Save and some issues where customers did not get the discounts they were supposed to. This person says, I shop at New World in Opotiki and regularly get refunds from overcharges on my shopping. I always check my dockets, and this has been happening for many years. Yeah, well, we need to keep our receipts and check them, it seems. Don't forget, you can check out all our stories online, including our video reports. We'll be back again tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The National Cyber Security Centre says it's supporting Waikato District Health Board after it was hit by a ransomware attack believed to have originated overseas. The DHB's head, Kevin Sneeze, says Waikato is working closely with other health providers to cover urgent operations. A report from the Auditor